The shrill alarm shatters the pre-dawn silence at 6:30. As the boy sleeps defenseless, the silver-haired woman leans over him, her sudden closeness blurring the line between guardian and intruder. The maid-like woman greets him with a languid gaze, her disheveled poise making the morning feel strangely intimate and dangerous. He jolts awake, cheeks burning and eyes wide, overwhelmed by the shock of her sudden appearance in his life. The little boy curls up on the ground, shoulders shaking as he cries alone, swallowed by helpless shame. His mother looms above him, hands on her hips, catching him in his secret misery with a stern yet worried presence. She rests a firm hand on his head while he bawls beside her, torn between masculine pride and a desperate need for comfort. He watches her with weary familiarity, knowing another overwhelming lecture is about to crush his excuses. She leans close, voice low and serious, forcing the boy to listen as if his whole world depends on these words. The empty playground stands still, her unseen promise hanging in the air like a fragile shield against future pain. She presses her forehead to his, vowing rescue, and he clings to that certainty as if it were his only lifeline. His eyes light up with hope while she boasts of her hidden strength, turning his fear into shaky belief. Her face softens, but her words cut sharp, ordering him to choke back his tears and stand on his own. He tries to obey, lips trembling and eyes wet, fighting a battle against the sobs clawing up his throat. He buries himself in her chest anyway, crying louder as her teasing scolding fails to dam the flood. She stretches out a hand toward him, inviting him home and away from the loneliness that had swallowed him. He kneels and crushes a cigarette underfoot, quietly choosing her guidance over his own reckless impulses. Hands suddenly seize him from behind, and he panics as the comforting scene threatens to be ripped away. He reaches toward her fading back, voice cracking with terror that she might vanish if he lets go. He bolts upright in bed, drenched in sweat, still shouting for the mother who exists only in his nightmares. He sprawls on the mattress, staring at the ceiling, trying to swallow the ache left by a dream that felt too real. He clasps his hands before the altar and greets his mother's photo, masking grief with a mourning ritual of respect. The worn photograph of their embrace reminds him that his tears still flow for her, even after 11 long years. Mid-prayer, realization slams into him, and his calm expression snaps into panic as he remembers the day of the week. He stares at the calendar in horror, imagining his grandmother's wrath if she returns to find the house a mess. He frantically vacuums the living room, sweat flying as he races against a deadline only he can feel. He wipes his brow with exaggerated relief, proudly counting each completed chore like a soldier checking weapons. The doorbell's sudden chime startles him, slicing through his brief moment of victory. He hurries toward the entrance, confused and uneasy that his grandmother might be back far earlier than expected. He slides the door open mid-greeting, only for his voice to falter at the sight that awaits him. A tall, expressionless woman in formal attire stands there, her gloved hands folded as if delivering a verdict. He forces a nervous smile and stammers, dwarfed by her imposing figure and the mystery of her sudden arrival. She coolly confirms his name, her sharp gaze dissecting him like an assignment rather than family. He hesitates, trying to cut in, but his uncertainty leaves his words hanging weakly in the air. Delivery men crowd the doorway around her, while she calmly directs them, leaving him sidelined in his own home. He watches the men haul boxes inside, bewildered as his once familiar house transforms under strangers' hands. He discovers the living room cluttered with stacked boxes, tension rising as his territory is quietly invaded. She lowers her eyes in a practiced bow, her formal apology hinting that something much bigger has already been decided. She introduces herself as Shirajiku with rigid professionalism, while he gapes at her confident stride and cryptic mission. She tightens her apron and declares her duty to protect him in his grandmother's stead, turning his ordinary life into a guarded assignment. She looks down at him from above, calmly declaring herself his new mother, as if rewriting his life were a simple assignment. He staggers in confusion, mouth half open, unable to process the idea of his grandmother being casually replaced. She thrusts official papers toward him with clinical poise, explaining his grandmother's sudden absence like a business memo that leaves no room for refusal. He scans the letter with shaking hands, recognizing the handwriting yet sensing something about this arrangement is deeply wrong. Standing close behind him, she recites his grandmother's blunt instructions, while he stiffens at how easily his family has been redefined. A glance at the clock jolts him, panic over school crashing into the unease of being left alone with this imposing stranger. He walks ahead, frowning in thought, while behind him she watches quietly, her earlier odd claim about family still needling his nerves. The phrase "get along as a family" drums in his skull until he clutches his head, frustrated that none of this madness makes sense. Half shouting from the doorway with his bag on, he orders her to behave and stay home, trying to regain control by escaping to school. She silently watches him leave, her unreadable back, making it unclear whether he has just abandoned safety or stepped away from it. The peaceful school skyline feels distant, masking the storm of doubt he left simmering back at home. Slumped over his desk, he groans into his hand, regret gnawing at him for impulsively trusting a letter over his own instincts. As he slips into his seat, he realizes with a chill that he has left a complete stranger ruling his house. A mischievous classmate hooks an arm around his shoulders from behind, startling him and dragging his private turmoil into noisy school life. They argue over priorities as desks rattle, his friend teasing him about romance while he snaps back, too tense to laugh it off. Noticing a hole in his friend's sock, he automatically offers to fix it, mothering others even while his own need for care goes unmet. Girls crowd around, chattering in awe at his domestic skill, while he blushes and pushes them away, hating how exposed he feels. His flirtatious friend leans on his hand and studies him, remarking how he sometimes acts in a way that blurs friend and caregiver. The words "like a mother" slam into him, and he freezes mid-stitch, sweat flying as the label hits a raw, forbidden nerve. He clutches his nose and admits shakily that the word mother stings too much right now, even as his friend fusses over his bleeding. Walking home with a forced smile, he tries to reassure himself that the strange woman might already be gone and out of his life. The click of the front door and a braid swaying inside the entryway instantly shatter that fragile hope. She appears in casual disarray, apron on and tie loosened, greeting him with sleepy eyes that feel uncomfortably like home. He freezes in the doorway, eyes bulging and heart racing, ambushed by her warm welcome home, as if she truly belonged there. Hands over his face, he explodes in embarrassed outrage, demanding to know why she is dressed in such an alluring, domestic way. She lifts the hem of her skirt in puzzled innocence while he frantically slaps it down, mortified by how easily the scene turns indecent. She coolly cites research about boys his age as he flails, horrified that what others might enjoy feels like a nightmare closing in. Then she stretches out a hand and politely asks him to strip before entering, as though such intimacy were routine procedure. Facing him head-on, she repeats the request with firm patience, leaving him cornered between politeness and utter humiliation. Leaning close, she calmly explains her bizarre hygiene logic, while he flushes scarlet and sputters at talk of viruses and tracking devices. His protest breaks into panicked syllables as she presses forward, steamrolling his boundaries with unshakable, motherly resolve. Moments later, his head is trapped on her lap, his face burning while she gently restrains him with a hand that feels both kind and inescapable. She gazes down with soft authority, insisting that caring for a worn-out child is simply another duty of a proper mother. He squirms against the plush warmth of her thighs, senses overloaded, arguing weakly that this intoxicating softness is not what he meant. She questions him calmly about when his real mother or grandmother last pampered him like this, while he writhes in embarrassed protest. From above, she watches him with a knowing, almost tender look, as if testing how far she can push this imitation of motherhood. Pressure from her lap and hand throbs against his forehead until his thoughts blur, the overwhelming stimulus drowning out resistance. He admits in a small voice that he cannot relax at all, sweat beating as her supposed comfort only heightens his agitation. She rattles off clinical benefits of lap pillows and bonding, warning that the effect will soon kick in, just as his body starts betraying him. His vision softens and lines blur as unexpected drowsiness seeps in, pulling him under even while his mind still questions what she truly is. In his hazy vision, a shadowy motherly figure calls him to dinner, blurring nightmare and memory. He jerks upright on the couch, disoriented and clutching the blanket like a lifeline. Still sweating, he stares ahead in disbelief, rattled that he actually passed out. She presents a steaming plate of his favorite curry with unreadable calm, turning a simple meal into a calculated gesture. His throat tightens as he gawks at the dish, realizing how starved he is for food made by someone else. He shuffles to the table, pretending indifference even as her effort corners him into accepting. Leaning close with a spoonful ready, she softly urges him on, her gaze pinning him in place. She suddenly rises and insists he open wide, treating the moment like an embarrassing feeding ritual. He protests in horror as she quotes a ridiculous manual, turning dinner into a humiliating experiment. He yells that he'll eat alone, but she looms over him, refusing to let the intimate act be rejected. Grabbing his chin, she forces his face toward hers, their proximity crackling with awkward, suffocating tension. He snaps and chomps the bite with wild eyes, more to escape the moment than to taste it. His expression melts into stunned bliss as the flavor hits, betraying how deeply it reaches him. Chewing slowly, he blushes as nostalgia floods in, the taste dragging him back to a lost home. He freezes with his spoon midair, shaken that she somehow nailed even the family's secret twist. Bracing herself on the table, she calmly explains she aimed for a mother's flavor, as if copying love were technical. He grudgingly admits it is delicious, hating how clearly her cooking outclasses his pride. Flustered, he shovels curry into his mouth and declares a draw. Desperate to reclaim some ground, arms folded by the washer, he mutters that her skills alone are not why he keeps following her lead. Brandishing cleaning supplies, he rallies himself with the belief that in household chores, he still reigns supreme. Surveying the sparkling bathroom, he wipes his brow, satisfied that this domain at least remains his. Sinking into the tub, he suddenly realizes he has no idea what twisted contest he is even fighting. His thoughts spiral as he imagines her seizing the entire house, feeling his 12 years of order slipping away. Face flushed, he curses his grandmother in absentia, convinced this cohabitation will only breed disaster. His mind flickers treacherously to her beauty and curves, and he dunks himself in the water in panicked shame. When her voice calls from outside, he bolts upright, dread spiking at the thought of her invading even bath time. He shrieks at the door as she cites the manual about washing a child's back, treating his privacy like a technicality. Clinging to the frame in a towel, he yells that no book can possibly grasp how volatile a teenage boy's body is. She steps in, wrapped in nothing but a towel and scars, and his outrage collapses into stunned concern. Pressing in close, she coolly asserts her superior strength and urges him to stay calm, her dominance inescapable. Blushing to his ears, he's forced down to sit, overwhelmed by how easily she manhandles him. He stiffens as she stands behind him, towel clinging, her presence swallowing the small bathroom. Her breath brushes his ear as she orders him to loosen up, sending shivers through his already tense frame. She solemnly declares this steamy contact a necessary right to bond parent and child, while he mentally screams in denial. He watches her soapy curves move and thinks bleakly that her idea of motherhood is dangerously off the mark. Her hand presses his head against her slick skin as she critiques problem areas, turning the bath into a minefield of impropriety. Fingers suddenly clamp down with a harsh crunch, breaking the charged atmosphere with sharp pain. His strangled shout bursts out, a mix of frustration, embarrassment, and defeated surrender. Red-faced and dripping, he roars that this invasive pampering is exactly what he never asked for. He bolts from the bathroom in a flustered sprint, yelling that he's going to bed and begging her to finally leave him alone. Pressed against the floor beneath a tray, she murmurs self-criticism, frustrated that her clumsy imitation of motherhood keeps failing him. The quiet night sky hangs over the house, a calm veil that hides the chaos about to erupt inside. Sitting up in bed, he clutches his head and shouts at the darkness, sleepless rage boiling over at this unbearable new life. Staring at his glowing phone, he feels abandoned as every call to his unreachable grandmother dies in silence. While he vents aloud about boundaries, she stands behind him half-dressed with dishes in hand, their suffocating closeness mocking his plea for distance. He peers toward the half-open door and calls her name, tension creeping in with the stillness beyond. Yawning irritably with his phone in hand, he steps into the dark hall and unknowingly walks straight under a masked intruder's raised crowbar. A brutal strike flashes down, and his world explodes into pain before he even understands the danger. Kneeling and clutching his head, he trembles in shock as one robber babbles excuses and the other scolds him for hitting the kid too hard. Yanked up by his collar, he gasps as a masked face leers inches away, dismissing his worth like garbage. Sweat pouring, he realizes they are here to rob the house, their mocking words turning his home into a trap. One thug suddenly stiffens and glances upward, sensing a presence the boy desperately hopes is salvation. The two criminals bicker in the hallway about phantom voices, their nerves fraying as unseen danger creeps closer. Another hood snarls about useless underlings just as a scream rips through the house, proving his fears right. Shirajiku slides calmly out of a cabinet, eyes half-lidded, as if ambush were just another household chore. Standing in the dim hall, she coolly remarks on their rude nighttime visit, treating the invasion like an inconvenience. One robber spits an insult through his mask, rattled that this lone woman shows no fear. She grips his hooded head and chides his lack of manners, her flat stare turning him into a scolded child. The rest of the gang rushes in and jeers at their fallen comrade, still clueless about the threat standing before them. Brandishing a knife, their leader mocks the idea of losing to a single woman, his bravado hiding a flicker of doubt. In a blur, she seizes his knife arm mid-lunge, eyes cold, effortlessly crushing his illusion of control. She twists and drives him into the floor with brutal efficiency, her rookie mama manual proving anything but gentle. The remaining robbers flinch back as she advances, her presence alone bending the air with lethal intent. One thug grabs the boy from behind and presses a blade to his throat, using his terrified body as a bargaining chip. She launches forward, leg arcing high, her expression unreadable as domestic grace turns into deadly force. Her heel smashes the captor away in a single ruthless blow, scattering teeth and terror across the room. With her boot pinning him, she leans in and orders him, through clenched teeth, to leave this house at once. She tightens her grip and warns them never to return, drawing a final line they dare not cross. Panic-stricken, the robbers scramble to their feet and flee down the hall, their bravado dissolved into raw fear. Knife in hand and back turned, she stands between him and the doorway, her silhouette both reassuring and intimidating. Gazing up at her in awe and fear, he stammers out a trembling question, desperate to know what kind of being she really is. She glances over her shoulder with calm certainty and declares herself his stepmother, the terrifying guardian who will keep him safe.